You're listening to the Speaking Tongues podcast. I'm your host, El Charisse. Each week, I sit down to a conversation with multilinguals where we discuss and celebrate language, life, and culture through our own perspectives. Episode 133, Speaking Cantonese and Welsh. Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Tongues. I'm here today with Israel. Israel is a composer by day and a polyglot language enthusiast / YouTuber / podcaster by night, although nowadays usually in reverse, from Hong Kong and based in Manchester. His interest in languages was sparked by his musical ear and extends to a variety of language families. More recently, he's been drawn towards issues surrounding language, social change, and identity. Welcome. Thank you for being here, Israel. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm good. It's a very dark evening right now. That's the winter.
That is definitely winter time. I like to start each episode with the same question, and that is, what is your first language and which languages have you learned to speak?
Yeah, so it gets a bit complex with me because, as you say, I'm a sort of a polyglot. I do language learning as a hobby, so I don't really it's really hard to gauge what languages I speak on what level. But my mother tongue is Cantonese, which is from Canton, and I'm from Hong Kong myself. So I grew up speaking that, and I grew up in this environment that pretty much only speaks Cantonese. But also in school, we learned Mandarin and English, especially English from a pretty early age.
Mm.
And then I had a special school. That sounds like something else, but my school had French lessons for whatever reason, which is I'm kind of glad for. We learned foreign languages from pretty early on. Then I continued some French, but I didn't really enjoy it that much. And then in university, I started doing German, especially since I study music. So German is a pretty big part of classical music, especially from the 19th century. So that was what sort of sparked my enthusiasm for language learning. I discovered this was a thing that I enjoy a lot. I enjoy the process, the struggles especially. So that spurred me on to learn lots of languages. But right now, my best ones are German, Polish, and Swedish, but I also speak other ones. As I said in the intro, in the bio, I like to learn languages from different families. So I also speak some Hebrew, and then more recently I've been learning Cantonese and Welsh, and also British Sign Language because I live in Britain now.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these to various levels.
Yeah. That's exciting. So do you feel like your upbringing when you were, so I'd never been to Hong Kong, but I've heard that
I haven't been for a while.
I've heard that Hong Kong, and I would imagine that Hong Kong is a very multilingual place to live and to visit, to grow up. Did that, like, what was your understanding of multilingualism when you were in Hong Kong? Like, did you understand that it was something like a thing, or was it like normal to you?
I think the multilingualism tends to be overstated because of our status as a former British colony.
Mm-hmm.
Before Cantonese became the main language, Hong Kong was actually quite multilingual, like lots of different kinds of Chinese languages in cities. People learned each other's languages. But since Cantonese became the dominant language, we've been pretty homogenous. And so, as I said, we learned English from a pretty early age. But I often say that if we had learned it through an immersive way, then we would have been native. But because we learned it as a school subject, we learned it like through grammar, that kind of stuff. So it's still our second language, despite learning from really early on. But otherwise, yeah, obviously we have all sorts of minority languages because we are actually also an immigrant society.
Mm-hmm.
So I sometimes compare it to America because we have people from different parts of mainly Asia, and then they sort of settle in and learn Cantonese and or English.
Mm.
And we have like immigrant workers as well. So there are lots of different languages from different parts of Asia around, and of course English still plays a big role, just like everywhere else. And you do see English in lots of places, but I think it's yeah, it's an overstatement to say people tend to be multilingual. Like
Mm.
we learn it to a certain degree, but it's not native like Singapore.
Okay. Can we talk about Cantonese? Can we
Yeah.
start with Cantonese? Okay. So, especially because I have not had a Cantonese speaker on the show.
Have you not?
I haven't. I had a guest who was learning Cantonese.
Okay.
And if I remember correctly, you know, I don't want to misremember my own guests, but I do remember, she was of, her Cantonese heritage, like her
Right,
grandparents
right.
were Cantonese speakers. But I haven't really got a chance to dig in to Cantonese, and I would love to know so much about it.
Oh, sure.
Tell us about how the language is constructed. How are we forming sentences? Is it gendered? Is it tonal? Or tell us any other features of the language that stand out to you or that you find interesting.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I'm actually still quite surprised that you never had someone on because we are everywhere, like all over the world. Like the early Chinese immigrants were all Cantonese. So, okay. Anyway, yeah. So I've been teaching Cantonese for a while now, and then it's through that process that I gradually discovered more about my own language because
Mm.
you don't learn about your language, especially the structure, most of the time. We are a tonal language. I think our number of tones is on the bigger side. We have I insist we have six. Some people say nine, but they are misinformed. Um, so we do have quite a few of them. What else? It's not gendered. Actually, it's funny because we grew up in a pretty non-gendered linguistic environment, right?
Mhm.
It's just one was just neutral gender for everything. And then as we get into contact with the English world, we hear about this so-called pronoun mess, and then we're like, what is the point? It's just people. So yeah, so sometimes we sort of gently poke fun at this and say, oh, just call me koi, which is our gender neutral and our only third person pronoun. Anyway, we don't have gendered in anything like grammatical gender, but we do have counter or measure words, which is a general East Asian thing. I think like all kinds of Chinese have it, Japanese has it.
Mhm.
So sometimes I imagine that as sort of like grammatical gender, but on steroids. Uh,
Tell me
because
about that.
yeah, sure. There is like so many of them, and some of them have a logic to them. Like some of them refer to the shape and or form of something. Sometimes it's not about the form, but more like what it is. For example, you have one for animals in general, with exceptions. And then some of them is like are like categories, like for machines, for text. We have one for text, etc. But then again, it's never consistent. Everything has lots of exceptions. You sort of just have to learn each of them from context as people
Mm.
use them.
Mhm.
But my favorite thing about the counter words or measure words is that sometimes when the measure word already implies something about the object, you can sort of skip the object
Oh,
because
okay.
yeah, it's already clear. For example, I said we have a measure word for texts, for example, essays or paragraphs or newspapers,
Mhm.
articles. So sometimes I just want to say, well, that text over there. So I would just use the measure word and then put yeah, which means stuff after it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's quite fun to use this to sort of make jokes or puns, things like that, or just be lazy, which is what I do all the time.
So do you like how would we say that? So if we're talking about texts, you
Yeah.
said okay,
Books, for
books.
example.
Okay.
So for the counter for book is bun, and that's sort of books in general. So it could be textbooks, could be well, I'm losing my English as well. Novels, yes, that's an English word, not
Mm.
roman. Yeah, and any kind of books, right? So sometimes or for example, just a book is 一本书. Su is book. Uh, a textbook, for example, would be 一本教科書. So it also has the element for book in it,
Yeah.
etc. So you use it for all kinds of books. And then sometimes when I'm lazy, I just say 本嘢,
Mm.
the thing over there, which belongs to the category of books.
Gotcha.
Right. So give me the thing. In English, you could say that, right? But
Mm.
if you say give me the thing, it doesn't imply anything about the thing. It's just thing. But in
Yeah.
Cantonese, it would imply that it is a category.
Part of that. Okay,
Yeah.
that's so cool. And you were saying earlier about pronouns that
Yeah.
were you saying that there are no pronouns in Cantonese?
Oh, of course they are pronouns.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, they are. They're actually a myriad of them. But the thing is, we don't gender things by default.
Okay, it's the gender.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a gender. And historically, there's like lots of different ones. There's one for kings specifically. Uh,
What?
it's like you say His Majesty in English, right?
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
But in Chinese in general, it's not a Cantonese thing. In Chinese in general, there was a royal first person pronoun. Anyway, back to modern language. When you say he or she, it's the same one.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Because in lots of languages you don't have gender pronouns either,
Yeah.
like in Hungarian, Turkish.
Hmm.
So sometimes it causes problems, but then that's just what we call the pronoun game, right?
Yeah.
Like in English, you could be talking about two women at once, so there would still be ambiguity.
Hmm.
Whereas in Cantonese, you would have the same one for all of them. And the funny thing is, Mandarin is naturally also like this.
Hmm.
They don't use gender pronouns, but I think a century ago they wanted to be more Western, and so they introduced gendered pronouns, but only in writing, not in spoken language. And
Hmm.
now they have the problem of trying to make it gender neutral once again. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, but because Cantonese was never like the educated, quote unquote, educated language,
Hmm.
or it was like not written a lot, so we never went through that process of trying to be Western. So we
Mm.
always just had one, and then we started writing it down, and we don't have the gender problem.
Hmm. Does Cantonese have a reputation of not being an educated language?
I
Or
think that is just how the Chinese languages are,
uh,
historically speaking, because
uh-huh.
um, they have this vision of national unity. Everyone should know the same language,
Hmm.
like a lingua franca. And then and because of how they promote the lingua franca, which used to be classical Chinese, now it's Mandarin, right? And they promote it as the language of the educated. If you don't speak it, you are low class, or if even if you speak it, I think it's a quite a common slogan in China, if I'm not mistaken, to say you should speak the common language if you want to be civilized.
Mm.
Yeah, pretty strong wording there, but that's just how things roll. So that's
Civilized?
yeah, literally that's they do that all the time. Like if you want to be civilized, like don't litter, or don't, I don't know, break the law, and don't speak your dialect, that kind of slogan.
Imagine telling a thousands-year-old civilization who gets to be civilized and who doesn't based on your language? Oh my goodness.
Well, the official line is that it's all the same civilization, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's all Chinese,
Hmm.
which is actually a language family. But so supposedly it's just a different way of speaking, and it's a bit like or I mean, this is not the reality, but in the propaganda, it's a bit like in English, you want to speak in a certain accent or
Mm.
use certain words to sound more educated.
Hmm.
So you would shun dialects like the African American dialect. So it's
Hmm.
sort of the same idea, except
Yeah,
in the case of Chinese languages, it's different languages altogether.
yeah. I don't like that. Well, let's not dig ourselves into any trouble
That's
with
why I
the
say I'm
Chinese
into
government.
things with like social change and identity, because I think
Yeah.
in well, also in the Western world, but outside of the Western world, that these things have a yet an even bigger effect on languages because they could get way more dramatic.
Yeah.
Like for example, in Europe, you could speak a minority language somewhere,
Hmm.
and then like you have problems using it, or like you feel like you are not able to function as well in that language, etc. But in parts of the world, like in China, when you speak a minority language, you're actually being stigmatized actively
Mm-hmm.
by the society. So that happens quite often in different parts of the world as
Yeah.
well.
It's
But
and I'm really glad that you brought that up because I think about it a lot like as I'm doing this podcast. Like for me, I love to learn from people and about their language, their culture, their heritage and things like that, but I admit I often forget how political language can be in other parts of the world. And I
yeah,
want
yeah,
to have these lighthearted conversations and I don't want to put any stress or pressure on my guests or my listeners, but I do need to be reminded often that, if I don't like it, if I don't like a system, it doesn't really matter if I like it or not, but there are people who are hurting because they can't use their language or they feel like they're uneducated or they're uncivilized or they're not enough because of their language, and it has so much to do with political leadership and um
I I think it has everything to do with politics, which is kind of a problem because, like, personally, I am into politics, but I don't like to talk about it,
mhm,
especially on this kind of platform. Like,
mhm, of
I like to talk about it
course.
privately,
Yeah, yeah.
but publicly, I like to talk about the politics of language.
Mhm,
So sometimes I tell people, okay, I'm not talking about what's going on politically right now, but I want to talk about the dynamic between the power dynamics between different languages and how one might be like cannibalizing another one. That kind of stuff. I like to talk to people about it because I think there is space for change, uh, or I could make more people aware of certain issues.
right.
But at the same time, it's really hard not to slip into that politics zone and end up talking about like government, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but
Wow.
I think it goes both ways. Like some people would say, like the leadership is affecting the language, like just like how Cantonese in Hong Kong has so many English words. That
Mm.
kind of uh,
Really?
but also some people might think that the attitudes toward language might affect the political situation. So
Mm.
it's both ways
Yeah. Where do we hear English words in Cantonese spoken in Hong Kong?
all the time. Yeah. Um, I think it's several layers of loan words, borrowings, and code mixing. Because historically, we have like around 150 years of being a British colony,
Right.
and there was lots of interaction with the Brits. So you get words like bus and taxi from English.
Hmm.
So those words were more integrated. Um, they are still clearly a foreign word, but like in terms of sounds, they've been integrated.
Hmm.
And then more recently, we have words that we sort of take from English and then tailor them away in a way to make it feel more natural to us. Like
Hmm.
especially technology terms.
Right.
Like I say down for download.
Huh.
Yeah, we like one syllable things. I say down, and then like delete is D. That kind of stuff.
So efficient. I
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
absolutely. I love it. And then when you like shorten that way, it's easier to use it with like Cantonese grammar.
Hmm.
Like down jaw is that have downloaded. Cantonese or other Chinese languages as well is what we call in linguistics an analytic language. So
Hmm.
every part is sort of separate. So you just stick things onto the foreign word and then make them work together.
That's so cool.
But also because lots of people are educated in English
Hmm.
still,
Yeah.
like I was. So when we talk about technical things, we just constantly mix the words. Like, for example, when I talk about physics or linguistics, we just straight up use the English word without any sort of fitting it in or
Hmm,
integrating it. Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. That's why, like, I'm not supposed to say this yet, but I've been running a podcast about language and linguistics in Cantonese, and we often run into this problem of not knowing how to say some things in
Mm.
Cantonese.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
normally we would default to using the English word,
Hmm.
but we're like, nah, let's try harder. Let's try something different. So sometimes we might look it up on Wikipedia and just use the Chinese one.
Hmm.
Other times we actually started making them our own words. Because why not? Yeah, as long as
Yeah.
we make the context clear.
I love that. If you enjoyed this episode of Speaking Tongues, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Speaking Tongues podcast on Apple Podcasts and like and subscribe on YouTube so that other language lovers like ourselves can find the show. If you've been a long-time listener of the show or even a recent listener, you can now pledge ongoing support for Speaking Tongues on buymeacoffee.com or on patreon.com. In your opinion,
Yeah.
and in your travels and your conversations and everything, um, how does Cantonese stand out among the other Chinese languages? Like, is there something about the way it's spoken? Is it the shortening of words? Is it something about the I don't know. Is there something about Cantonese that make it stand out, make it unique, make it different, make it, of course it's special, so I won't single that out, but are there those things that make it stand out from the other Chinese languages spoken in China?
Well, for one, the loan words I talked about earlier because of our
Hmm.
long history with the Brits.
Yeah.
But also I think the thing with Chinese languages is generally they have a similar structure, they have similar grammatical categories
Hmm.
and features. It's just that how exactly they use those features differs. So, for example, in all the Chinese languages, they have verb aspects to
Hmm.
talk about like whether the action is finished or ongoing, or that kind of the different or states of the action.
Yeah.
And then our we have certain set of aspects, and some of them are I think relatively unique. For example, we have two endings for ongoing actions. One of them is for things that is more active. You're doing something. It might change the state. Might be
Hmm.
developing. Whereas the other one is you enter the state and then you stay there.
Okay.
Like for example, oh what's an example? Oh yes, say wearing clothes. So wear clothes is 着衫. If you say 着緊衫, it means you're putting on the clothes, which is an active action, like
Hmm.
it's ongoing, it's changing.
Hmm.
But if you say 着住衫, it means you have clothes on because you enter
Aha.
that state and then you stay in the state.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Oh.
And we have one for habits, like you usually do something.
Hmm.
Um yeah. But my I always tell people my favorite thing about Cantonese is we have an ending, a verb ending for hurting yourself.
What?
Yeah, it's amazing. But you can just take an action, add the ending ton, and then it means you hurt yourself doing that thing. And it's not very common because there's only so many ways you can get hurt. But
Yeah.
the fact that it is a general thing and it is technically you can add it to anything, it's amazing.
So how do you say it?
Um, so let me see. Uh So normally you have when you talk about actions that would logically lead to an injury anyway, like
Hmm.
fall, or to choke, you have pop ton, drop ton. Yeah, those make sense.
Hmm.
Um, but for example, you can say tag ton. Tag means kick. Kick doesn't necessarily lead to injury, right? But if you say tag ton, it means you hurt yourself kicking.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then you can do other things as well. Like I think that basically never happens,
Hmm.
but you can. technically, you can theoretically say, um, uh, what else? Oh, let's say drink tea, yum cha. Yum is drink. You
Hmm.
can yum chan. Uh, it's it never happens, but it's grammatical. You could say that, and it's amazing.
That's so interesting. I think that's a fun fact. That might be where, I mean, it's still early, but that could be the fun fact of the show.
Oh, yeah. Let's get the fun part out of the way, and then we can go to the sad part. No, but
Um,
yeah, it's fun because I didn't think about these things before I started teaching Cantonese. I started going into this side gig
mhm,
thinking I'm just going to be like a conversation tutor, help people with their speaking practice.
mhm.
But then it turns out not many people come looking for someone just to practice. Lots of people come for an actual teacher to
Yeah,
tell them about things
yeah.
because Cantonese is a lesser learned language. So I end up starting to teach, and then as I teach, I discover more and more about these things, and I had to like on the spot make lists of certain uh, uh, particles or examples, and then yeah, it's been such an experience.
Yeah, that's
Like
amazing.
yeah, we have things like called sentence final particles.
Hmm.
Again, they are in every Chinese language,
Hmm.
but the fun thing about Cantonese is you can stack them. So these particles, I need to explain. What they do is they express the tone of voice.
Okay.
Because in English, you use your like pitch to show your tone of voice, right? Or
Hmm.
volume. But because we use pitch for like actual linguistic tones, so we end up using these particles to tell people what I think about the thing that I'm saying.
Oh,
Like
okay.
we have one that says that we have we have a sentence final particle that means um well, I heard that. I'm not sure. Apparently someone said that. That seems to be the case.
Hmm.
Or we have one that means when for example you talk about an amount and you want to express that it's a small amount, as in your attitude. So you say the amount and then you say za, and that means you think it's very pitiful. And then sometimes we just stack everything together. I think you can do up to three to combine different attitudes into one sentence.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Everybody should learn Cantonese.
I think it is a different way of thinking about what you're saying, but every language is, right? In every
Mm-hmm.
language, you have to think about what you're trying to express,
Yeah,
but sometimes Cantonese makes certain things explicit.
yeah, yeah.
And
So you
yeah.
you mentioned that it's not commonly learned, and you
Mhm.
know your students are coming to you looking for a teacher because it's not as commonly learned. And you actually spoke to me before about Cantonese in being in the early stages of a trajectory of decline and revival. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I'm actually not 100% like within this belief, but it's something that I read about in a book. So there's a book called Speak Not by James Griffiths that I read around a year ago by now that
Hmm.
compared different languages in various stages of oppression. And then strangely he included Cantonese. I was like, why? It
Mm,
turns out he's trying to make a point that there is a certain trajectory that all oppressed languages go through. So there are some telltale signs in the early stages, like there are phenomena that you'd see when the language is starting to be threatened, and
hmm.
then it goes into decline. And then if they're lucky, if they don't die, then they go into revitalization. Um, so I read that book and found that really interesting. So I started thinking whether Cantonese is on that trajectory.
Mm,
And certainly there are signs that it is, because again, that goes back to the politics, right? There are certain things that political powers are trying to push. And one of those things is, taking out smaller languages in the name of national unity.
right.
And also, just outside of politics, there's like huge cultures that exert their influence, just like English, and also the mainland Chinese culture. So they are exerting influence. and and there is a potential that might end up just changing the linguistic landscape of where I'm from.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to think about this and wonder if we don't do anything about it, it's going to go on that slope. It's going to go on the
Yeah.
decline, and then you can only hope that it bounces back up.
Right.
That's what it's where I am with my just thoughts at this moment.
And you speak Taiwanese or you study Taiwanese or both?
I learned it. As I
Okay.
said, I learn languages as a hobby.
Hmm.
So that was one of my uh well spoils. um, but I started learning it because I wanted to do an experiment.
Hmm.
It's actually started quite early on, like a decade ago. I wanted to know whether learning a language that is similar to my mother tongue actually makes it easier. Because
Oh,
lots of people learn European languages, right? And European languages are very far removed from my mother tongue,
right.
even though I speak English reasonably well. So I started with Japanese.
Hmm.
Obviously, it has very little in common in terms of like the roots with Cantonese, but there are lots of uh, words that are cognates that are similar to Cantonese. And then that was a failure. So I don't speak Japanese,
Okay.
but afterwards I thought, okay, what if I learned a language that is actually in the Chinese language family?
Yeah.
So I tried Taiwanese because I think I have the most um, chance of using it uh, outside of China.
Hmm.
So I tried doing it, and it was a success because it actually was really intuitive. I guess deep down, I just sort of could find the patterns, how this maps to that, or how the sounds map, or how the sentence structures correspond to each other,
Hmm.
and so that was a fun experience. And right now, even though I don't know a lot of Taiwanese vocabulary,
Hmm.
so there's a lot of native words that are still foreign to me,
Hmm.
but I can use the sort of my basic language pretty comfortably just on account of that fact.
Yeah.
Now with it in the internet age, so
Hmm.
actually there are more ways for speakers or people interested in learning these minoritized languages to come together.
Hmm.
So actually, I hear a lot about Cornish because of the great polyglot Richard Simcott who's learning it. It was an extinct language, but now there's a community of people who have revived it, who are
Hmm.
learning it and using it, and that's mainly thanks
Yeah.
to the internet. And I think
Hmm.
it's the same with places like Taiwan,
Hmm.
where maybe in daily life, um, again, depending on where you go, you might not be able to use the language at all.
Hmm.
Um, but when you go online, there's more people who
Yeah.
are passionate about it, at least.
Yeah. Well, something that's been, I guess, a success story, as far as revitalization or, bringing awareness to it would be Welsh, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, from what I understand about Welsh is that, it is a minoritized, or it has been a minoritized language, and now there's more eyes on it. There's more visibility and more usage. There's definitely, at least I've noticed, more people learning the Welsh language. Has that been your
Especially over
experience?
COVID.
Yeah.
I heard. I think Duolingo said the Welsh course was the fastest growing one during COVID. Lots of people started
Wow.
doing it.
Yes, Welsh. That's amazing. When did you start learning Welsh, and what made you start on that journey?
So, so me as language learning hobbyist, I often have a stupid reason to start learning a language. And in the case of Welsh, that is because I was moving to Manchester, and then which is around 2 hours from North Wales, which
Yeah.
has a relatively high proportion of people who speak Welsh. So
Hmm.
like, yeah, why not? And obviously, like lots of people in the Anglosphere, the Celtic languages sort of have a mystic quality. Like,
Yeah.
oh, it's very bulky or whatever. So did you know Welsh has been used in lots of like fantasy games
No, but I believe
as a yeah. Yeah,
it.
so this is side story. So Tolkien based one of his Elvish languages on Welsh, right? Because he
Mm-hmm.
loved it.
Yeah.
But nowadays, when people make new fantasy games, they literally just put Welsh in there and then call it like the like I don't know the old tongue or whatever. So just just a side note, it's
It's
funny.
so interesting that you say that because the episode that I did on
Mhm.
Welsh with David and listening to him speak Welsh, I was just like, this language sounds like old as the hills. Like it just, I can't even describe why I feel that way, but it just something about Welsh just sounds ancient.
I can
Not
break that down for you. So I have a theory,
okay.
just literally just formed in my head. So Welsh has a lot of the sounds,
Mm-hmm.
and English still has them, but Old English has more. I think Icelandic has lots of the sounds. So it's sort of in the DNA of the language,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's why when you hear lots of the sounds, you associate it with an older kind of Germanic language.
Hmm.
That's my theory for now.
Icelandic has the thorn sign that
Yeah,
like the th that
the English used to have.
yeah. So maybe it's like something in the to borrow your
Yeah,
term in the DNA of speaking English. Maybe I feel like, oh, the is old and we don't use it anymore. And it's I don't know. I think you're onto something.
yeah. I literally just thought of that, and the F as well, the D with the stroke through it.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but I sometimes I don't like to talk of like whether a language is old or not because that comes with various connotations. Because we have the
Mhm.
same problem with Cantonese. Lots of people when they want to promote Cantonese, we say it's an older language
Mm,
because our vocabulary has more in common with like classical Chinese compared to
okay.
Mandarin.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like from the other perspective, you could say that it's an outdated language.
Oh, I didn't
So
even
some
think of that.
Yeah, so like it could go both ways.
Mm,
Depends on like your each individual person's attitude towards the language. So I try not to bring that up because objectively there are no older or younger language,
that's
right?
fair. Yeah.
There are older literary histories, and Welsh does have a pretty long literary history of being written down in poems and things like that.
Hmm.
So that contributes to that. But when you say the language is older, it's technically not true. It all came from the same Proto-Indo-European language,
Hmm.
and then you might like bring up different reactions from different people.
Hmm. Yeah. So how did you we took a little detour, but how did
Oh,
you
sorry about
no,
that.
no, no. I think it's nobody's fault, but how did you get into Welsh? You said you moved to Manchester. Manchester is about 2 hours from Wales.
Yeah.
So you decided, hey, why not give it a shot? And how has it been for you?
So I with lots of like lots of different languages and lots of different learners, I started with Duolingo to sort of test the water, see if I like it. So I started there and then I learned at a surprisingly good pace, I think,
Hmm.
because at this point I'm quite experienced with learning European languages. I know how they work, and Welsh is a much more, in a sense, much more European language than English is. Like with the grammar, it's a bit like French. So
Mm.
so
Hmm.
I knew what I was doing. So I started watching TV and listening to podcasts, sort of just like what I usually do. And more recently, this is like new news for now. I started doing a course, and the thing about learning Welsh is that because it is there is an incentive for the government to promote it. They have like lots of different plans to encourage the use of Welsh and learning of it. So there's actually a really structured system for learning it. So I think there's different levels. There is like a centralized national center for teaching Welsh. So you
Ooh.
can take courses delivered by various universities and centers that is all based around the same curriculum.
Hmm.
And then like all the reading resources are like reader books, for example, are based around this levels,
Hmm.
this system.
Yeah.
So I initially I didn't want to do that because personally I don't like language classes just because the easiest thing for classes to teach for teachers to teach is grammar, and grammar is my strongest point.
Hmm.
So I'd rather if I were in a class, I would like to practice other things than grammar.
Yeah.
But at that point, I was starting to get a bit desperate because it's a bit of a struggle to find resources for learning Welsh on my own or finding opportunities to use it, especially when I'm in England.
Hmm.
So I decided to go on the course, and that's where I'm at now. So actually, now every week I get to speak it a bit, and for now I'm focusing on learning this language. I'm hoping to get somewhere in like 2 years' time,
Yeah.
uh, because I have plans for it.
That's exciting. Can you share those plans? You don't have to if they're personal, but if it's something you want to share, I think we'd love to know what your plans are.
Oh, well, I all I can say is in about 2.5 years' time, I am going to uh become a permanent resident of the UK, and
Yay.
that comes with certain requirements,
Okay.
and some of those things can be done in Welsh
Oh, okay.
because like it's a legal provision. So that's
Hmm.
all I'm gonna say.
Okay.
So people who are in the know, they will know because someone else, one other person has done the same thing that I want to do,
Okay.
and it was all over the news, and I was like, I want to do that.
All right. Well, wish you all the best of luck. I'm sure you'll smash it.
Sorry, I had
Um,
to be so like mysterious and
it's okay.
whatnot.
We enjoy a little touch of
It's
mystery over here.
yeah,
Uh,
just my goal for now. It's a pretty distant one.
um, so we've got, we're focusing on minoritized languages, and you also have studied some other minoritized languages. And I'd love to know what are some of the unique challenges that come with wanting to learn a language that's minoritized or one that's on that trajectory of decline. Some that you've noticed, and maybe something that, well, I'll save that for a second question, but that's
Yeah.
that's part one of the question. Like, what are some things that you've noticed to be a challenge when trying to learn these languages?
I think there are two parts to this. So one of them is the challenge of actually learning the language, and the second part is the challenges surrounding learning the language.
Okay.
So first thing is it's harder to find resources or opportunities to use it. As I said, I resorted to joining a class, which I didn't want to initially because I felt like there are no other chances to use it. Because when you learn, for example, French, you go to France, you know that people will be speaking French there.
Mm-hmm.
But if you learn Welsh, for example, you go to Wales, on average, there is around 17% chance that someone speaks Welsh.
Okay.
That's a national average, I think.
Okay.
So you even if you go there, you don't have much of a chance of doing it. You need to know exactly where to go. So, for
Mm,
example, the first time I went to Wales, I had already learned some Welsh. I went to Cardiff, which is an area with relatively low Welsh speakers because it's the capital.
mm,
Um, and then I went there. I saw lots of signs in Welsh, which is a good thing, lots of visibility there. But I hardly ever heard it. And then when I tried to order something in Welsh, it's like what? Um, so uh, that's a main challenge, I think.
hmm
And I asked on a Welsh learner group, how can I use this language in Cardiff? And they're like, okay, go to this shop, go to this place, that place. People there speak it.
mm,
So
hmm
you really have to know where to go. So
Yeah.
so my impression is, unless you're a local, so you know everyone already, it's really hard to find these opportunities. Like even if within the same shop, unless it's specifically a Welsh speaking shop, so there could be different baristas. One of them speaks to it, one of them doesn't. So uh, you have to make your own opportunities.
hmm
Uh, and as for other learning resources, I think it's getting better now. At least with the ones that I'm learning, because there's governments behind them. It might be worse for other languages.
hmm
Um, but like in Welsh, there's like lots of reader books and so on. But still, compared to bigger languages, it's always a challenge to find, for example, a TV show that you're interested in
Right.
that is also subtitled. Um, a common problem I've had is that TV shows are often subtitled in English or in it's rephrased, paraphrased in Welsh. So
Oh.
that's kind of the daily hurdles that I go through. So
Hmm.
lots of the time I have to like repeat more, use my listening more carefully,
Hmm.
that kind of things. Whereas, for example, with German, there's like different websites or brand names, tools to help you enjoy series in an accessible
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. I
Um,
would I would also think, and I could be wrong because I've yet to visit the beautiful country of Wales, but I would imagine if you're going into a shop and whether you know the person or you know that there's someone there who speaks Welsh, I would imagine, and again, I could be wrong,
but
that there may even be some reluctancy for that person to speak with you once you start speaking with them in Welsh. And for whatever reason, maybe because they can tell it's not your first language, maybe because you don't look like you from around there. Is that something that you've encountered or something that you've heard people encountering? And I just want to clarify, my comment wasn't about unhospitable nature of the Welsh people. Like I don't have that preconception that they're not friendly or they don't want to talk. But I'm specifically thinking about, and I guess, this is my brain trying to make an association, thinking of like if you go to France and you think that you're going to speak French and you're going to
ah,
practice French, and the person can tell from the way you speak that, okay, it's not your first language, and maybe they've never seen you around town before, or they've never seen you come into this establishment before. Is there a reluctance, in the way that we often see, and I've experienced, in France, I've experienced that in Italy. And that's not a condemnation on those people, because and I shouldn't have said those people, but it's not it's
oh,
not like, not talking down to any particular group, but just wondering, I think all of us as language learners eager to practice, we've all encountered that in some form or another. So I was just wondering if that happens, or if you've encountered that in Wales, or
okay.
but
Well, I
so.
can speak to that. I for me it's full on condemnation because I have learned a few languages where the native population are pretty good in English in general, like
Hmm.
Swedish and German.
Hmm.
And then you go there, you speak their language to them, and they always reply in English
Oh, I
because
know.
it's a path of least resistance, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So it happens to me quite a lot, which is why I was quite surprised when I went to Lithuania and talked to people in Lithuanian, and they replied in Lithuanian, even though they spoke English as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But in Wales, it has an extra layer because it's about the identity, right? It's about
Mm,
they want to promote the language. Obviously, there are still going to be people who only speak English to you, even though they can speak Welsh. But at the same time, as I said, lots of people who do speak Welsh would be happy for you to try. And the common advice that I see people say is that even if you don't speak much Welsh,
mhm,
just when you're in Wales, try to start a conversation with bore da, like good morning, and then
mhm,
finish it with diolch, thanks. Everything in between is English, but
mhm.
at least like it's like a sandwich, right? The sandwich of conversation in Welsh as
Mhm.
is sort of a respect to the local culture, and even for example, baristas or people in the service industry who don't speak Welsh would know those words. So it's a good attitude, a good thing to try, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wales sounds like a really amazing place. I'm
I I've actually haven't been there a lot of times, like several times.
mhm.
Um, so I'm not going to be the tourism board or anything. Um, but I have generally pretty good impressions of the country. Um,
Yeah. I'm looking forward to visiting someday. Um, I know that you are a fan of the longest place name
oh
in
no!
in the world, and I wonder if you want to give it a go. here on the podcast. If you don't, then we can just cut this
You
part
make it
out.
sound like a big
But
deal, but
you know why it's a big deal? Because I didn't know that was a thing. And now I realize that it's something that people ask Welsh speakers to always say.
yeah.
And now I'm a
Yeah,
little
on
bit
like the
like,
Hollywood talk shows,
yeah,
right? All the time.
exactly. And I think it's like, I just think it's really cool. But, in the risk of completely cheapening this conversation, if you'd like to throw um, your hat in the ring, please do. But if you don't, no
Yeah,
pressure.
this is your Jimmy Kimmel moment. No, it's funny because when you don't know it, it looks so long
Hmm.
and daunting, but once you learn it, it just it feels much shorter,
Hmm.
which is weird. It's I don't know, like 10 syllables or so.
Hmm.
So it's Llanfair bwll gwyngyll coger y chwyntro bwll Llandysili gogogoch.
Ah, you did it.
Yeah, I can do it any time of the day. It's a common party trick, I guess.
Yeah.
I've actually
Yeah.
been there, so
Oh,
it's
cool. You
not just that I
posted
learned
you
it.
posted a video from there, I think.
I did.
Yeah,
So
I
it's funny.
remember.
So
I
I
remember.
was visiting a friend in Bangor, which is or it's on the Wales mainland.
Hmm.
And it's a university town, but it's just opposite that village, which is on a big island.
Hmm.
It's called Anglesey, or in Welsh, and it's Mon. Uh, so I visited my friend, and they were like, "What do we do now? There's nothing to do in this town." And then she's like, "Well, you want to go to that place? I used to live there." And I was like, "Okay, cool, let's do it." And then as we walked there, which takes around half an hour, I started seeing the different things that make up the place name. Like it's like a tiny parish church. There's
Hmm.
actually two churches in the name,
Yeah.
and then like different parts of the river, tree, that kind of stuff. So I was like, yes, I have a new idea. Let's visit everything that makes up the place name. And then we did that. And that was my
That's
day
so
out.
fun. That's fun. Please let us know about what you're doing, your podcast. You mentioned some speaking events. Tell us about your music, all that good stuff that you want us to know, um, more about you. But most importantly, please let us know where we can find you.
I enjoy public speaking increasingly. So I go to those polyglot or language events quite often. And then since last year, I've been speaking in them. So as I said in the start of our conversation, this topic that we're discussing right now actually inspired me to do a talk at an Edinburgh language event. So it should be online somewhere now. Um, so where I actually get to go into more details and talk about like facts and statistics rather than my experience.
Mhm.
Um, Also, as I said, I'm a composer for now. I also want to get better at that. Um, that's why I should be focusing on composing anyway. So recently, I wanted to fuse my two sides, like composer by day, polyglot by night. I wanted to do something that involves both.
Mhm.
So earlier this year, I wrote an art song, which is a fancy word for a song in classical music, uh, and I wanted to write it in Cantonese. I couldn't find a poem
Mhm.
that is fitting for my purpose. So I wrote my own and put it in there and taught an English singer to sing it. And then afterwards, I gave a conference presentation about why it matters to make art in neglected languages.
Right.
So I guess that's sort of my niche now. I talk about these things surrounding like language and society and identity a lot.
Mhm.
But normally, most of the
Mhm.
time, I do things on YouTube.
Yeah.
So my YouTube is called Rhapsody in Lingo. Um, there is an ongoing series about my month in Lithuania, but also I recently made a video about Welsh. It's just sort of a place to dump all my different thoughts about language learning,
Yeah.
basically, and like talk about my progress. I have a channel for my music, which is just my name, Israel Lai, and then I have a channel for my podcast, which is in Cantonese. So I guess most of your listeners won't be listening to that. but it's the
Not if we
one
all learn
where
Cantonese.
that's the goal. Actually, our podcast had two main goals. One of them is to talk about languages in Cantonese because not many people do that.
Yeah.
Uh, as I said, lots of people have to resort to English or other
Hmm.
languages to talk about like technical scientific things. So we're like, let's do that. And the second aim is to help people who are on the right level to listen to more Cantonese. So that's why I painstakingly transcribe every episode by
Yeah.
hand.
Ooh.
Yeah, there's no AI that can help with that, not in Cantonese. So I do
Not
it by
yet.
hand.
Yeah.
I don't envision that happening anytime soon. But it's fun. And one of our co-hosts is it works in like natural language processing.
Hmm.
He knows things like language models. So sometimes we just take all the transcripts, put it in the language model, and like generate something just for fun.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm also Rhapsody Lingo on Instagram.
Awesome. I will add all of your links into the show notes for this episode so that people who are listening and they want to get in touch with you can just click the link and find you right away.
That would be nice.
I'm so excited. I'm so happy that we finally had this opportunity to chat a little bit. And, I got to learn a little bit more about your background and your languages and where your passions are. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, yeah, I'm happy that you were so interested in Cantonese because actually, as someone who learns so many languages, I don't get to talk about my own language often.
Mm,
So
yes.
yeah, there's a chance to geek out a little bit.
Well, I love it. That's what I'm here to do. And I've really enjoyed this time speaking with you. I like to end each episode on the same question, just to have a little bit of fun on a parting note. Do you have any jokes, popular sayings, tongue twisters, cool slang words, idioms, words of wisdom, or words of advice in Cantonese, Taiwanese, or Welsh to share and to teach us?
See, this is the weird thing. I envisioned this discussion to be a lot more depressing uh than it turned out to
Why?
be. Because it's not serious thing, that language decline, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
So I brought a phrase that is quite a serious phrase. Well,
Okay.
turned out so much fun. But either way, I'm gonna say that because that's all I've got. So it's a saying in Welsh that I think
Hmm.
applies to lots of minoritized languages like the ones we've been talking about.
Hmm.
So it's read Cenedl heb iaith, Cenedl heb galon, and that means a nation without a language is a nation without a heart. I think that
Whoa.
is debatable, but I think in the context of, for example, Welsh, it
Hmm.
really says something about the importance of the language,
Hmm.
because it contains like all the past knowledge and history, and
Absolutely.
would be a shame if they lost it. And same for Cantonese and other similar languages.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect um, phrase to kind of sum up our conversation. So, thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
And now it's time for you to teach it to me so
Yeah.
I can learn to say it too.
So I chose this partly because it's relatively simple. So I could just break it down word for word.
Okay.
So Cenedl,
Canada.
yeah, it means nation.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's weird because it's a DL at the end, but I think generally there's a schwa in there. Cenedl,
Canada.
yeah.
Okay.
Heb is without.
Heb.
Heb,
Uh-huh.
and then iaith is language.
Yaith.
Iaith,
Yaith.
yeah,
Okay.
iaith.
Canada. Heb. Yaith.
Hmm. And then Cenedl heb galon.
Canada. Heb.
Gallon.
Gallon.
Gallon. It's a bit like the unit of measurement, right? Gallon.
Like gallon,
Um,
gallon. Canada,
yeah. So
Canada
heart
heb
in Welsh is calon with a
calon.
C,
Mm-hmm.
but we didn't even get to that. They do this fun thing called initial mutation,
Mm-hmm.
constant mutation, and after heb without, you need to change the k to a g. It's
Oh,
gallon.
that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's without the heb, it would be Calon with a C,
Calon.
but
Yeah.
with the heb, it has to be Galon with a G.
Gallon.
Galon.
Yeah.
Cenedl heb iaith?
Hmm.
Cenedl heb Galon.
Exactly. I think it's a beautiful saying.
I think so too. I think Welsh sounds really beautiful. Um,
Yeah.
I'm turning into one of you guys. Like, like I'm gonna learn a little bit of
No, no,
Welsh.
no. Start with Cantonese. Start with Cantonese.
But Cantonese first, because everybody should learn to speak Cantonese. That is the phrase of
Absolutely.
the show. Israel, this has been joyous to speak with you. I'm so happy.
Yeah,
I'm
and you
so
too.
happy that we had this conversation really quickly. Do not think about this too hard
Oh
at
no.
all.
What is
No, no,
this?
no, 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 no. In the first language that comes to mind, as you mentioned, you speak about a dozen of them. In the first language that comes to mind, after you've been having a conversation like this, you've been talking to someone for quite some time, what is the best way to say goodbye?
Well, it's still going to be my mother tongue.
Okay.
And it's a bit ironic because we talk about Cantonese so much, but our most common way to say goodbye in Cantonese is bye bye.
Bye bye.
No, you need the tones. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Bye.
Yep, there
Bye
you go.
bye.
You can't just put an English word there without the tones.
Oh, sorry. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Israel. Thank you so much. And I will be talking to you soon.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Special shout out to Speaking Tongue supporters and listeners Heidi L., Linnea H., Pat N., and Yadi A. New episodes of Speaking Tongues are available every Monday at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to like and share episodes with other language lovers like ourselves. Hoil!